Engine number 73020, one of the BR Standard Class 5s, has finished its scheduled turn of work and is booking on the shed. It has been working for 12 to 16 days and is due for an X-examination and washout. The firebox, tubes and boiler will be cleaned out and the engine given a thorough wash and brush up. Here is a drawing that shows what it looks like inside the boiler. The pile-up of ash in the firebox prevents the fire burning properly. The hot gases can't pass through the tubes freely because of the ash deposit. The scale in the boiler and water spaces prevents the heat from getting to the water properly. So the engine steams poorly and burns more coal than is necessary. This is what it will be like after the boys of the shed cleaning staff have finished their job. The cleaner the inside of the engine, the more steam it will produce for each shovelful of coal burnt in the firebox. The first job is for the fireman to report the engine on the shed. The reporting clerk takes down the details of where the engine has come from and tells the footplate man where to leave it in the yard so that the shed turners can take charge and move it about as required. 73020 booked on the shed at 7 a.m. Very shortly afterwards, the shed turners take over. Their first job is to move up to the water crane. On the way there, they pass right through the coaling stage because on X days the engine is coaled after it has been stabled, so that any stale coal in the tender can be thrown forward while the engine is in the shed. At the water crane, the fireman sees that the tender is correctly positioned before swinging out the crane arm. If you hook up the lid, it leaves your hands free to press down the crane arm against the counterbalance. As the water flows through the arm, its weight holds the arm down. But when the water is turned off and the arm empties, the counterbalance lifts it clear of the hole again. And when that's done, the thing to remember is to close the lid. It keeps the dirt out. After filling the tender tank, the next stop is the ash pit. The fire dropper is ready, and the engine stops with the smoke box right over the ash hopper. The BR standards have self-cleaning smoke boxes, but over the last 12 to 16 days, a small pile of ash, in lumps too large to pass out through the screens, has collected in the front of the smoke box. About 6 shovels full. So the driver and fireman have to wait until the smoke box has been cleaned before they can move the engine up. They stop the engine so that the self-cleaning ash pan is right over the ash hopper. The fire dropper knocks up the catches and opens the ash pan hopper doors. The next thing is to drop the fire. He knocks up the catches that hold the rocking grate in position, eases the lever backwards and forwards, then tips the fire bars right up so that the back half of the fire drops away through the ash pan into the waiting hopper between the rails. Don't forget to replace the catches before going on to drop the front half of the fire in the same way. The fire gone, he closes the firebox door and both dampers to prevent cold air getting to the firebox and boiler while they are still hot. That would cause the metal to contract too quickly and distort its shape. Once the fire has gone, the engine starts to cool down slowly. The ashpan doors are closed and locked in position, and then the engine is ready to go to the shed. In the shed, the engine is stabled on a road where both the X-examination and washout can be done. While the engine is still in steam, the boiler smith and his mate take out the smoke box screens so that a test can be made for leaks in the steam pipe and other joints. The locking bar comes out first. Then the 3 screens. These are taken out while the engine is hot, but the baffle plates will have to be left until the engine is much cooler. These men are the first of a team who will work on the engine, sometimes together, sometimes one at a time. You'll see how it works as we go along. As the last of the screens come out, the next member of the team arrives, the examining fitter. His first job is to carry out a steam test. If there are any leaks, his torch will give away their position because the escaping steam will blow the flame about. He signals that he is ready. Back in the cab, the driver has put on the handbrake and he goes on to close the cylinder cocks, fully apply the steam brake, and ease open the regulator, enough to fill the pipes with steam. The fitter doesn't only watch for steam leaks, he also listens. An experienced man can often locate a leak by ear alone. When the fitter has checked both sides, he signals to the driver to close the regulator and puts out his torch. No leaks to report, so he climbs inside the smoke box to hammer test the large pipes for corrosion. Once again, everything is in order. So the fitter starts on his detailed examination of the rest of the engine, while the driver opens the cylinder cocks before he leaves. It is now 2.5 hours since the engine came on the shed, and the fitter's X-examination will take half an hour, which brings us to 10 a.m. The examining fitter notes the last of the repairs he has found to be necessary, and the next member of the cleaning team, the cooler down, takes charge of the engine. He uses the live steam injector to fill up the boiler from the tender tank. As the cold water flows into the boiler, the steam pressure drops. When it has fallen to about 40 pounds, it will soon be too weak to force the water up into the boiler. So the cooler down comes back and turns off the water, allowing the last of the steam to blow down. This blowing down, and the period the engine is allowed to stand afterwards, is 3 hours. After the 3 hours of this gentle cooling down, a water regulating valve is connected to the washout hydrant, and a hose is run to the live steam injector exhaust pipe. Another hose is run from the highest washout plug in the boiler backplate to a drain in the shed floor to carry away the overflow. The water can now be turned on. The regulating valve is set at the first position, 300 gallons per hour, and the water flows through the boiler, slowly cooling it down for 4 hours, which takes us to 3:20 p.m. The regulating valve can now be moved to the second position, increasing the flow of water. By this time, the engine is cool enough for the boilersmith and his mate to come back and take out the baffle plates from the smoke box. These baffle plates and the bars they hang on have to be removed so that the tubes can be swept by another member of the shed team, the tube sweeper. He is connecting his steam lance to an engine which is still in steam on the next road. He carries the lance across to our engine. He pushes the nozzle into the end of each of the large tubes and blasts out the ash with a jet of steam. This is how it looks inside. When all the large tubes have been cleaned, a rod and cloth are used to clean out the small ones. There may be occasions when you find a tube is completely blocked. This can be dealt with by withdrawing the rod and taking off the cloth. You can then use the screw to cut through the blockage. When the blockage is cleared, replace the cloth and carry on as before. By the time the tubes have been swept and all the ash pushed through into the firebox, the engine is cool enough for the barman to get into the firebox to clean it out. The barman opens the dampers. Then he puts on his dust mask before getting into the firebox. Each in their turn, the men of the shed cleaning staff are ready to come on the engine to do their share of the wash and brush up. His first job is to climb onto the brick arch and brush down the face of the tube plate. Meanwhile, at the other end of the engine, the tube sweeper collects his tools and prepares to leave for his next job. Back in the firebox, the barman is shoveling the ash off the top of the brick arch and down onto the fire bars, where it falls through into the ash pan. By 5:20 in the afternoon, the engine has cooled right down, and the washer out can empty the boiler. There will be about 1,500 gallons of water in it, and that will take quite a time to run out. But the washers out don't wait for that. They start taking out the top washout plugs as the water level falls. By the time the boiler is empty, all but one of the plugs have been removed. And when this washout plug is out, it will make 41 in all, plus handhold covers, all of which have to be taken out before washing out can start. While his mate is taking out the last plug, the washer out prepares to start the actual operation at the footplate end of the boiler. First, he uses the straight nozzle to wash away the scale and deposit that is collected on the top of the firebox. His mate turns on the specially boosted water at the hydrant. When the straight nozzle has done its job, a flute nozzle is put on. This has a hole in the side, and it washes the scale off the inside of the boiler backplate. You'll be able to see the jet of water as it passes across the next hole on the left. A drawing of the inside of the boiler will show how the flute nozzle can get at the backplate. The whole process is repeated for each of the washout plugs on the footplate. Straight nozzle first to clean the area in front of the hole. Then the flute nozzle to clean the backplate. The scale that is washed off falls to the bottom of the boiler where it can be raked out later on. When they've finished on the footplate, the two washers out walk to the front of the engine and start to wash out the smoke box end of the boiler. Here again, they use the straight nozzle first. Then the flute nozzle as before. But at this end of the boiler, they have to use a third nozzle. A long one to wash the loosened scale along the boiler to the foundation ring. From here, it can be raked right out of the boiler. While his mate is finishing raking out, the washer out fetches the boiler smith, who has to inspect the work done before the parts can be reassembled. The firebox is the first to be inspected. He examines the firebox stays, then tests them with a hammer. If one of them fails to ring true, it means it is broken and will have to be replaced. After examining the firebox, the boilersmith inspects the inside of the newly cleaned boiler, using a mirror and a torch. He passes it as satisfactory, so now the washout plugs can be replaced. While that's going on, the boilersmith sights the tubes from the smoke box end to make sure they've been thoroughly cleaned. There are no repairs in the smoke box, so the boilersmith and his mates start to replace the baffles and screens. Meanwhile, the fitters start work, carrying out the repairs listed by the examining fitter during his inspection earlier on. They're renewing a side rod taper pin. As the boilersmith and his mate replace the last of the screens, the washer-out calls to his mate to turn on the water for filling up the boiler. All work on the smoke box is complete and the engine is ready for steam raising. A thin layer of coal all over the bottom of the firebox is the first thing. Then the firelighter. Then some well-placed cobs, and you've got the beginning of a good fire. The fire will receive attention every now and again as the steam raiser goes on his rounds. 4 hours later, the fire is spreading nicely, heating the firebox and boiler gently. In another 4 hours, there's enough pressure to work the blower. Just a touch, which draws up the fire, spreading it more quickly. By 8:35 in the morning, there's enough steam for the fitter to make his vacuum tests before the new set of footplate men take over the engine. The fireman's first concern is the making up of his fire. As the preparation time goes by, the steam pressure builds up. You remember that the engine didn't take on coal before it was put in the shed, so the first job after leaving the shed is to coal the tender. For this job, a train setter allowed extra time. The tender tank will want topping up before the engine leaves the yard. Down with that lid again. You should take this opportunity of trimming the coal to make sure that no loose lumps fall off while the engine is on the road. (73020) books off the shed in good time to pick up the 1050 Camden. She's fresh from a wash and brush up, and you can see what that means. There's a good draft through the clean firebox. The hot gases move easily along the tubes, and their heat passes quickly into the water in the boiler, giving a good head of steam to get the train along the road. Every ounce of coal is doing its proper work. This is the result of teamwork among the shed cleaning staff, each man doing his best and relying on his mates to do the same. For the fireman, a properly serviced engine is a good engine. The cleaner the inside of the engine, the less coal it burns. Over the top and time for another round. You fire to the driver, keeping the bed thin but covering the air holes. Control your fire. That's the way to keep coal consumption down. Down the side, across the front, along the back, and down the middle. The Camden will be running on time today.